Evening. I'm so honored that we have Lorraine with us today. If you've read the notice for today's meeting, you'll have read her bio. It's extensive. I'm not going to go over it. Just to say that this is an extraordinary career that began in education. She's a very highly qualified teacher who began with teaching children, classically trained, and then as a Montessori trained teacher, and has moved into educating corporations and individuals and the public at large with an extraordinary background in environmental awareness, environmental information, and the entire science of sustainability, of supply lines. What caught my eye initially was working in the hotel trade, where the consumption of materials is so immense and so the levels of waste can be so grotesque. And this is somebody who tackled perhaps one of the most difficult aspects of wise and sustainable use of our resources. She's been honored in many, many ways. She's a global TED speaker and a graduate, I'm not quite sure how you say it, a graduate of Al Gore's environmental program. So we're very, very honored to have you with us, Lorraine. Thank you so much. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Birgit, for that beautiful piano piece. What an absolute honor to be with you. I just wish I was there. I've been to America. I lived there for 5 years, loved it. I came home to make a difference in my complicated country, and it's just getting more complicated. So I'm going to start. And New Jersey, I went through by train. I have to say, we didn't stop, unfortunately, but I will get there again one day. So here's my screen, but I just want to tell you, I've got lots and lots of slides. Because of my Montessori training, I'm very visual. I think people need to see. So if they're too many, just close your eyes and listen. There's a lot of information because I want to share a lot of stuff with you. Just take what you want, take what you need, and let the rest just wash over you. So here we go. Climate, ecocide, and sustainability. Can we influence? So I just want to change my other screen that my son set up, but I can't. Anyway, it can be fine. Can we influence what comes next? That is the burning question. And that is our biggest challenge. We're going into a gunfight with a fly swatter. We're going into a huge fire with a water pistol. This is what we're going to leave our children. And this is what they're going to say. Why? Did you do something? Time for action. I had a look at ethics and climate change. I Googled to see what ethics groups had to say. Any action on climate change confronts serious ethical issues of fairness and responsibility across individuals, nations, generations, and the rest of nature. Climate change is one of the most challenging issues facing the world today. And here is the news. What I've done, I mean, there is so much news. I've just taken the last 2 weeks to have a look, see what's happening around the world, and it is absolutely terrifying. The West and the East at the same time in the States had fires and areas underwater. Your bootleg fires are probably far worse than it was when I did that slide. These are just screenshots of the news. Germany had those terrible floods. Poor China had 8 months rain in one day. Imagine being in that substation with that in that underground train, and the water started rising right up to their chests. The building in Miami that so tragically fell down was built for a different climate, and they worried about the existing buildings. England, for the first time ever, has had an extreme heat warning. Look at Hoover Dam. Can you imagine how much water that is, that white area that is evaporated away? And the bottom right slide shows a polar vortex where normally you would have the cold air circulating around the pole. But now, because of the heat, it's almost like washing your bra in very hot water and the elastic gives way. So that is why New York had that terrible cold, because the vortex had shifted. And of course, the jet streams are shifting as well, which is very frightening. The Amazon, which is our lung for oxygen, is now releasing more carbon than it stores. And we are reaching an irreversible tipping point. Once we reach that tipping point, it means we can't claw our way back. And you know, the planet is going to survive. It's us who won't. And there's another heat dome that came from late yesterday, that slide, that news, another one on its way to you. And this really frightens me. I've been there, I've been to Death Valley. 59 degrees is impossible. Humans cannot live with that temperature. So reading the news is almost like reading the book of Revelation. And people are saying it won't happen to me. I hate to tell you this, it will happen to you. It happened to me. Not long ago, I think about 18 months ago, I gave a talk in Cape Town at a big conference center, and they had what we have very bad wind in Cape Town. We had a monster storm. It was so bad that you actually couldn't stand up. It was impossible to walk. Cars couldn't drive. Planes couldn't take off. Trains had all gone. It was terrifying. All the people came off the streets into the hotels or wherever they could get shelter that very same night. My friend phoned me from a town called Knysna, which is surrounded by forest, to tell me her house was burning down. And she was trying to drive down to the beach, picking up people and dogs on the way down. Slightly before that, the year before that, Cape Town. Cape Town is an enormous, very modern city, ran out of water. And my daughter was in France on holiday. It was so cold that they stopped, so hot, that they stopped sightseeing and spent their time looking for fountains to dip and cool down in. And the winter before that in New York, you were not allowed to leave your hotel because of the terrible blizzards. What we're going to talk about today is COVID versus climate. Climate and ecocide are the two topics that must go together. I cannot talk on climate alone. I have to talk about ecocide at the same time. The choices we make and how easy they are to make. People make it so complicated. And then adapt or die. I have a whole workshop on how, especially in Africa, we are suffering for the sins of the rich nations. And we end off with what they must do, and then also, of course, what we must do. My story, just a little bit of entertainment to inspire you and to tell you to tell the children to get out there and do it. I started this journey I'm on now when I was 69. And this is how it all started. I grew up on a very ordinary farm. We had a pit toilet. We didn't have electricity. We didn't even have running water. And we had never, ever seen plastic. I took my gap year, which is what we do in South Africa. Everyone goes overseas when they finish their university qualification. And I went to London. From there, went to Canada. From there, did a long, wonderful trip down to Los Angeles, right in the middle of the hippie era. And Vietnam. And my husband was British, and they wanted to call him up to go to war. So we joined all the marches. We marched against Vietnam. We marched for civil rights. We marched for the environment. We marched for women's lib. And we lived the life of hippies in communes. We had jobs. We had to earn money. And we grew wonderful organic herbs, which we inhaled because it wasn't illegal in 1969. Nixon made it illegal shortly after that. So procurement, I came back to South Africa, and you know, the universe will sometimes put you in places that you didn't want to be. And the universe decided I needed to be a contracts and purchasing manager for a huge hotel chain of 82 hotels and do all the purchasing for the purchasing manual in this dreadful corporate environment instead of teaching. But they paid me well. I had 2 children to educate, and I made it my mission to entertain myself, to find a greener version of every single product and service in that purchasing manual. All the things that I'd learned in California, which has always been light years ahead. Lots of people had no idea what I was talking about, but I just determinedly carried on. We tried to build a green building. Our very first green development for the hotel group was the convention center in Sandton. And it was way ahead of its time. So I installed a recycling program, and there was no such thing, actually. You couldn't get recycle bins. And a young man arrived in my office and he said, let me help you, I'm out of work. So what he did every day, he was very clever and ahead of his time. He collected dry waste from lots of the hotels in Johannesburg, and he built a little conveyor belt. He pulled people off the street every morning and taught them how to separate the waste, and he sold the waste, and he put them all into proper little homes. And the woman on the left ended up managing a whole warehouse of recycled paper and a big industrial paper baler. It was a wonderful, wonderful story. I reduced the costs of the hotels by 75%. We reduced the volumes of waste by 80%. And I wrote a beautiful report with pictures, statistics, some financials, some interviews, lots of comments. Lovely report of this successful endeavor, and sent it upstairs. And nobody took a blind bit of notice, because when you're short, used to be blonde and middle-aged, in my day, I think it's still the same, you might as well have a paper bag over your head in the boardroom. So I left in a huff. I changed my attitude. I tried to gird my loins, like the Bible says, but a girl can't do that. So I put on my big panties and I left. And that frustration is what gives me my energy now to do what I do at the age of 78. And I moved to Cape Town. Remarry. Look at, girls, can you see my face? Just read my lips. Look at, don't remarry in your 60s, because that's the rest of your life. No, I'm just kidding. The irony is, the hotel started calling me back. Now I had left, calling me back and saying, what were you talking about, going green? So of course I would teach. I'm a teacher, not realizing that these people are hoteliers. And I'd say, I've been trying to tell you for 15 years that I thought they needed to see, touch, feel, and smell what I was talking about. My Montessori training. So my bookkeeper and I, in a moment of absolute madness, booked 100 square meters at one of the big hospitality trade shows. And we decided to build a mock hotel of 5 rooms and furnish it from front to back so these people could see what green or eco-friendly products were. What I had done is I had taken my old purchasing manual and to share it with lots of people, which I couldn't do when I worked for Southern Sun, but now that I was on my own, share some of the things that we'd learned in the suppliers on an online directory like a Yellow Pages, just listing products that I knew, people that I knew. And Al Gore's movie came out, An Inconvenient Truth. And I thought, you know what? I know who has got eco-friendly products. And we created a second online directory, just listing the green products. We don't sell anything at all. I'd be a multimillionaire, I can tell you, if we got a little fee for everything. And those websites were the first in the world, actually. They are 21 years old now, and 33,000 people use them every month. Not only hotels, everybody uses them now. Architects, our government uses them, everyone. So these are some of the projects that we built and furnished front to back. We did homes and we did hotels to prove that from the doormat through to your landscape garden and your renewables on the roof, you can have eco-friendly products. Nothing is 100% green, the greenest we could find throughout. An example is that bedroom, no plastic anywhere. All that bedding was completely natural, organic materials. In the lounge, we had wool carpeting, bamboo furniture, hemp upholstery. We had a hybrid car. We had models of renewables for the daddies to look at, because mostly the moms came through. And in the kitchen, we had FSC flooring. We had recycled tabletops. We had non-toxic chemicals, organic vegetables and beverages, VOC-free paint, energy efficient appliances, absolutely everything as green as we could find. And then lots of other big shows invited us to do similar projects. Even BBC Lifestyle at our big dome exhibition center here. And none of this was planned. Those websites were supposed to be a hobby for when I moved to Cape Town and remarried. Eskom, our biggest energy supplier, invited me to speak around, to run a roadshow for them and do talks to 14 cities in South Africa. I've ended up consulting and doing more projects. And then consulting is what I absolutely love. This is Hotel Verdi. If ever you come to Cape Town, visit this hotel. It's near the airport. It's one of the greenest hotels in the whole world. They've just won, I think, something like triple platinum LEED, international awards throughout. In the front, you'll see wind turbines. On the top, they've got photovoltaic, they've got solar, they've even got geothermal. I didn't even know we had that in South Africa. At the back, they've got a natural pool, and all the operating equipment is eco-friendly. And they'll virtually, I think they've got a couple of months to go, and they'll be completely off the grid. If you go, ask for a tour, and they'll take you underground to see all the magnificent equipment. And what we do, I won't obviously go through this with you, is we walk from front to back, either virtually, or we do a walkabout with you in your hotel or your office or your hospital or your home, whatever you want. And we'll just step back in each room and we'll say, you know, next time you need to paint, or next time you need to carpet, or you need a new appliance, or you want to landscape your garden, or you want chemicals, there might be a better version, a better product to use than you're using at the moment. And that way we slowly get them to convert to being green. And 20 awards, as Elaine was saying, I mean, I actually laugh when I see this because this was never part of the plan. And this is since I turned 69. That's in the last 9 years, 20 awards. I think sometimes, I have to be honest, sometimes it is because I'm the only person who does what I do. And now, parallels between COVID and climate change. I see surprisingly lessons that we can learn from where we are at the moment. COVID, I think, is a dress rehearsal for climate change. The similarities are both of them had advanced warming, both have denialists and conspiracy theorists, both have social inequity, both have created food shortages. Both people are saying the cure is worse than the problem. Both of them know no borders, and both of them are deadly. The differences are where we show up how negative, how bad the news is for climate. There's a vaccine for corona, yes, not for climate. The response to corona was really quick. Response to climate is very slow. Is it reversible? Yes, corona is, but climate will not be once we reach the tipping point. Strategies for corona are very clear. For climate, they are unclear. Mitigation is aggressive for corona, but mild for climate. Action for corona is global. Unfortunately, for climate, it's still regional. All the governments get together. Pollution decreased during corona, and of course, with climate, it gets worse by the day. Economic recovery is possible, definitely, with corona. In fact, it looks quite positive. And climate, no. Could it be avoided? Yeah, you could avoid corona. Impossible to avoid climate. Look at that. All the climate comparisons are negative and bad news. Biodiversity improved during corona. It was destroyed. It's being destroyed by climate change. And it kills. Corona kills humans. Climate kills everything. What worries you the most when you're going to bed at night, when you're worried about your children 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What frightens you about the future? Some of these things. These are some of the very obvious ones. Fourth Industrial Revolution, sixth mass extinction. My son is a physicist, and he's worried about artificial intelligence. And of course, climate change and ecocide and COVID, the next virus. There will be another virus. And for the sake of this talk, we're only looking at climate and at ecocide. So what is climate change? I'm speaking to the converted here, so we won't spend lots of time. This is a 4-day workshop, which we won't do. But the planet is heating up because the sun beats down on the earth. We take what we need. The heat used to bounce out that we didn't need. But now, because of this blanket around the earth, that heat can't escape. It's caused by deforestation, fossil fuels, transport, obviously, agriculture. We were quite surprised when we realized how bad agriculture was. And its effects are flooding. I think Cape Town, Table Mountain will be an island one day. Heat, we haven't begun to see the migration from famine, drought, hurricanes, flooding. And that at the bottom right is a botfly. A botfly is a fly in Zimbabwe that lays its eggs under your skin, and then they hatch out through your skin. I mean, it is just abominable. And we've never had them here, but we've got them now because insects are moving. Malaria is moving to get away from the heat to milder climates. So those are what we call the hockey stick. The carbon dioxide shot up 150 years ago it started, which made global warming at the same time shoot up from the Industrial Revolution days. And the bottom slide is what people like Donald Trump don't understand. There is always been cold and always been hot. What is happening now? We're having hot more often than we used to have it, but we are still having cold, extreme cold. And what is ecocide? Eco means life and side means to kill. So the ecological collapse caused by capitalism, growth for the sake of growth, is the ideology of a cancer cell. We're going to need 5 planets if we carry on living the way we're living now. And the impacts are just dreadful: pollution, deforestation, all the terrible things with our natural environment. And this is a typical slide we show children, just to show everything is connected. Absolutely everything needs something else. So if we remove the bees, thanks to Monsanto and Bayer that are spraying our genetically modified crops with Roundup, if we lose the bees, we have 3 years and we'll be gone. In South Africa, we are the only country in the world where our staple food is genetically modified, and you in America as well. Banned in 30 other countries. So they're just chewing up our natural environment. The carbon targets that companies need to meet now are made to sound so complicated. They're very simple. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said we have to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. That's 10 years from now. We have to have 0 emissions by 2050. The next report is coming out very soon. In fact, I think within the next week or so, it's coming out. I'm dreading seeing the new report because in the previous report, they didn't include methane. And methane is far worse than carbon dioxide. The Paris Agreement, where all the countries agreed to try and keep the temperature, the rise in the temperature below 1.5 degrees more than it was 150 years ago. And the hype. What happens and what I find is there's so much hype around climate change that people give up. Cognitive dissonance kicks in and they just get completely overwhelmed. You know, you have carbon offset, sequestration, neutral, carbon credits, capture, carbon sinks, carbon budget, just too much. And all the jargon and the cliches and the words, it's too much. We can keep it simple if we just made the effort. All the symbols people need to read, all the acronyms are so, I hate acronyms. Just say what it is. And logos, lots of logos that need to be learned. And the choices we make, it's actually very easy to make the right and make a better choice once we just understand how easy it is. The new catchphrase is circular economy. This actually makes me quite cross because it's what I've practiced it for 35 years. I just didn't have a name for it. Now it's called the circular economy and it is trending around the world. There are workshops and webinars and Zoom meetings happening every day where people sound as though they're reading the MBA thesis using acronyms, instead of just saying it's so simple. We used to buy something, the linear economy, use it and throw it away. Then we bought something, recycled it for a while. That's why recycling is a scam and an absolute myth. It is a joke. Only 3% of the plastic ever gets recycled. It ends up in waste anyway, in the sea or in landfill. So what they're trying to do now is anything that's manufactured, try and keep it in circulation as long as you possibly can. And they call that the R's, like recycle, reduce, and reuse are the words that we know, but they've added all these words, like rethink, like Uber and Airbnb, refurbish, reduce, like make something lighter, or make it less. Repair, like our grannies used to repair everything. Reuse, recover, refuse is a big one that I love. And remanufacture means send it back to the factory when it gets old, remanufacture and make it new again. And this is a very simple linear thing of buying something. I mean, getting your raw materials, going into production, distribution is used, and finally is disposal. And what they want us to do now is all through that process, see if you can take things back to use again, or remanufacture them, reuse them, or make them last longer. Lots of wonderful opportunities there for manufacturers, anything that you make or buy. Conscious consumption, which is what I specialize in, is just think before you buy. And the people who produce stuff, think before you start producing. Think from design stage right through to disposal. Normally, people look at the energy, the water, and the waste. If you have a green building, they have a solar panel on the roof, they have a grey water system and some recycle bins, and suddenly that building is green. What about everything else? This is what really worries me. All these things that are being neglected there have woken up. I will say something about lockdown. The good thing about lockdown is people have stopped to think. And in fact, I was on a workshop from Brazil 2 weeks ago, where there were 14,000 people talking about sustainable interiors. And they saw me in the chat, which was really a bit of a surprise. And they asked to interview me on Instagram, which I don't have. And 7,000 people listened. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? So there's a huge new awareness and more action. So what I suggest people do is what we did when no one else knew what to do. You look at your raw materials, where they come from. Then you see what happens during manufacturing. How is it transported? How is it packaged and distributed? What happens when you use it? And often in South Africa, I'm talking to a room of 1,000 buyers that work for the government, who didn't do science or geography at school, and I've got to get them to understand. So what I say to them is, just imagine you're holding the hand of a very small child, and he wants to know where something comes from, your cell phone or his new t-shirt. I'm telling you, it's really quite hard to explain the history of that product. He's going to say to you, Dad, when they got the raw materials, did they damage a forest or the people who live in that forest? Or did the mines leave a mess behind? And did they send everything by truck when they could have sent it by train? And during the manufacturing, did they use children in those factories? And might you have to say yes? And then the packaging, he said, was everything packaged in plastic? And you're going to have to say yes. And during its use, he's going to say, Granny says they weren't all fat like people are today. And all the children didn't have asthma like we've got asthma today. And then he's going to say, and when you get rid of it, Dad, this is where it ends up. And he's going to say, Dad, you knew that when you bought that product. So choosing the most compliant. As professional procurement officers, this is our biggest challenge. And this is how I make it really easy. If you enjoy this kind of a table, this is a template with all the sums into the Excel spreadsheet. And what you want to do is you've got 3 suppliers to choose from. So you put numbers instead of names. You look at the key performance areas. What is important to you? You might be a safari lodge in the bush, or you could be a big 5-star hotel in a city. What's important to you? The quality, the delivery, the price, or the packaging. And you put all the sums and it goes, it does all the sums for you. And it tells you which is the green, which is the most compliant, meeting your credentials, your criteria. All you do now is you create a similar sheet for the green credentials. Make it easy. And based on trust, ask the supplier to answer some questions for you. And again, it will help you decide which is the greenest product without knowing which is the supplier. I think it's also quite good for choosing a husband one day, maybe. Adapt or die. We've got to adapt because it's happening faster than we thought. And this is a workshop I run for tourism in Africa, because Africa has enormous challenges. We are getting climate change 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. So what I do is, I'll go through these slowly, obviously, but I say to anyone in a hotel or in a lodge or even in the countryside or on the seaside, have a look at the city that you're in, the nearest city. Can the water seep in through permeable pavements, or will it run off and flood everything, which is happening in a lot of our very modern cities? Reinforce your dams. You have particular problems in your state. With sea level rising, you're going to have to start building walls. And then recognize heat stroke for what it is. It looks like a heart attack. Are the hotels ready for people coming in off the streets? Are they looking to see if sewage is going to bubble up in their toilets? Food, we're going to have to change the food. In Africa, maize and wheat might not survive climate change. We have to start eating indigenous foods and heritage foods, and buy locally, of course, for your carbon footprint. Look at your factory. Look, for example, even with COVID, we can't get chips now because people didn't have backup risk programs in place for their supply chain. Agriculture must be turned on its head. No more genetically modified crops and no more tilling of the soil. We must rotate the crops and we must start cultivating different plants. And then look at your emergency pantry. Google what you should have in your pantry in your region and Google what you should have as a survival kit. Now, those two are very interesting because it depends on whether you are going to be stuck where you are or whether you're going to have to escape. So you will need two different types of pantries and survival kits for those two needs. And I must hand it to you. Well done to New Jersey. It's the only time I've ever seen a prepare for a disaster for animals, for pets. Brilliant. And who knows what that is? These are the sort of things we don't think of. Anybody know what that is? We need them in Africa and you need them too. That's a snake grabber. Because when you have rising water, the snakes and rodents come looking for protection. And in Africa, which we're not ready for, Al Gore has figured out that animals are moving 14 feet a day away from the equator. So in your part of the world, they're moving north, and here they're moving south. So we're going to need to start moving fences. So the question at the beginning was, can we influence what comes next? No. They figured out that if we want to limit warming by 2 degrees centigrade, we have a 5% chance of doing that. 1.5 degrees centigrade, we have a 1% chance of doing that. But we can lessen the suffering. We think that climate change has actually reached its tipping point. We've got to move quickly. Sustainability from the very beginning. We used to say early days in Los Angeles when I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency. I forgot to mention, that's how I started my journey when I lived in LA. I worked for the environment. It was brand new. The EPA was brand new. And we used to talk about acid rain, remember? Then we talked about the ozone. Then we talked about going green. Then we talked about sustainability, which I didn't like. I said, give me another word. And finally, there is another word called regenerative systems. And the difference is, sustainable means do no harm, leave things as they are. Regenerative means leave things better than they were before. It's not about less, it's about more of the things that matter. It's not about what we're against, but what we are for. There's a village in Britain that's been built entirely on what people want. They don't even think about what they had before. And the very, very best advice I'm going to give you today is speak to the old folks. They know stuff. Find the oldest person in your area and ask them what they remember. Listen to their stories. They didn't invent those stories a week ago. Those stories are centuries old and they're there for a reason. My mom was a landscape gardener. She never built a house or started a garden until she'd spoken to the oldest person. And she built a house at Henley-on-Klip, which is a beautiful little village south of Johannesburg on the river. And she asked this old fellow, where have you seen the river? And he said, ma'am, I've seen the river right up to here. He said in Afrikaans, tot hier mevrou, sê hy. And my mom built a house up there, and she was the only one who wasn't flooded. So be disruptive. Go out. It's fun. March. It's fun. March with the kids. That little girl is not a brat. I get so angry when people call her a brat. And those of us who are teachers have had children like this in our class. She is Asperger's on the autism spectrum. She's an absolute genius. But she doesn't see the noise. She focuses on climate change. She doesn't hear all the nonsense that's going on around her. And she was going to die. She'd stopped going to school. She'd stopped eating. She couldn't get out of bed. She was so depressed. Her parents had done everything they could think of, got advice from all the professionals they could. And her dad said to her, okay, we give up. If you can answer any question, scientific question on climate change, I will let you do what you want to do and go and sit on the sidewalk. And she could. And he let her. And look where she is today. And look, we have to start doing, we have to start protesting. We are much too quiet. We have to do what Mahatma Gandhi did. what Martin Luther King did, what the suffragettes did, and what the kids are doing today around the world. Because you have a choice. Every time you have to make a decision, you can do things the old way. Nothing is 100% bad. Nothing is also 100% good. But very often there is a better way. Just ask me or look it up and see if there is a better way to do something. All these things they tell us to do: ride a bike, stop using plastic, shower with a friend, go vegan, put up solar panels. All those things are not enough. What they must do, they being politicians and industry, they must increase carbon tax, make the people who are dirtying the atmosphere, make them pay high tax. Renewable energy, agriculture, forests, we've got to start saving the forests. Carbon capture is a huge disappointment. We thought it was the answer. You know, if you want to go carbon zero, they said, okay, we will capture carbon to balance the carbon we're putting in the air. They have to do more work on that. And geoengineering, I think, is a terrible idea, but they're working on it. Gates is working on it. It's a bit like science fiction, but maybe something will be effective. And then what we must do, we mustn't try and do all the big stuff. We can do plenty on our own. We must nag the big guys. So we must fly less, obviously, eat less meat, eat organic, buy locally, refuse plastic outright. Just say no. Every plastic product can be made out of hemp. But of course, there's no profit in it for the oil industry. Divest your investments from fossil fuels and talk to everybody. Talk, and sign petitions. Petitions work. We got genetic modified ingredients out of baby foods in South Africa just by signing a petition, and sponsor Greenpeace and all the other associations that do such good work, but my goodness me, they need our money. And boycott products. You know, there was a very quiet boycott in the States against Head and Shoulders shampoo. Procter & Gamble got such a fright that they changed the ingredients within a week or two of the boycott. And then, of course, vote. What a tragedy that Al Gore was a Democrat, because they've politicized climate change, which is an absolute devastation. And please remember my message to you. Your clients and your shareholders and your friends are watching you. Animals are watching you. Nature is watching you. The planet is watching you. And even your food is watching you. You know, they say you are what you eat, but you are also what your animals eat. And most important of all, the children are watching you. And they're going to say, you know, you knew. What did you do? Thank you. That's me.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. Lorraine, you've given us so much to think about. I feel as if my brain's going a million miles a minute, all the things that I'm trying to absorb. And I know that you simplified it and you reduced it, but you still gave us an enormous amount to think about. Thank you very, very much.